Have you ever imagined an incredible future for yourself? Maybe you've pictured writing a book, starting a business, moving to another country, getting into the best shape of your life, or finally becoming the person you've always wanted to be. You can see it so clearly. The life, the success, the freedom. And yet days turn into months, months turn into years, and almost nothing changes. Most people assume this means you're lazy, unmotivated, or simply not serious enough. But psychology suggests something very different. In many cases, people who dream the biggest aren't lacking ambition at all. They're trapped in psychological patterns that make action feel far more difficult than imagination. The strange part is that many of these people spend more time thinking about success than those who actually achieve it. Not because they enjoy failing, but because their mind has quietly learned to protect them from something deeper than failure itself. Today we'll explore 9 psychological patterns that often keep big dreamers stuck. And by the end of this video, you may discover that your biggest obstacle isn't laziness. It's something you've never even noticed. The first pattern is what psychologists often describe as the fantasy reward trap. One of the most common reasons people never act is surprisingly simple. Their brain has already rewarded them before they've done anything. Whenever you vividly imagine achieving a goal, your brain activates many of the same reward circuits involved in actual success. You picture standing on the stage, launching your company, publishing your book, receiving praise, or finally proving everyone wrong. For a few moments, it feels real. That emotional reward is powerful. Sometimes powerful enough that your brain temporarily loses the urgency to begin. Dreaming becomes emotionally satisfying while starting becomes emotionally expensive. That's why some people become experts at planning, researching, imagining, and preparing, but remain beginners forever when it comes to action. The dream slowly becomes a place to visit instead of a destination to build. If this feels familiar, you're not alone. Your imagination isn't the problem. It's simply doing a job that action was supposed to do. The second pattern is even deeper. Most people believe procrastination comes from fear of failure. Sometimes that's true, but many ambitious dreamers fear something much more painful. They fear discovering they're not who they imagine themselves to be. As long as the dream stays inside your head, it's perfect, untested, unlimited, still full of possibility. The moment you take action, reality begins giving feedback, and feedback threatens fantasy. Some people would rather protect the version of themselves that could have been extraordinary than risk becoming someone ordinary. Without realizing it, they protect potential instead of developing ability. Psychology calls this identity protection. They're not avoiding work, they're protecting hope. Ironically, the longer they protect that hope, the further it drifts away from becoming reality. The third pattern is perfectionism, but not the version most people imagine. True perfectionism isn't about wanting things to be flawless. It's about believing imperfect action is emotionally unsafe. Every project must feel completely ready. Every decision must guarantee success. Every plan must be perfect before the first step is taken. So people keep preparing. They buy more courses, watch more videos, make more detailed plans, and wait for the perfect moment. But perfection keeps moving. Eventually, preparation becomes another form of avoidance, because starting means becoming a beginner, and beginners make mistakes. If your self-worth depends on performing well, doing nothing feels safer than doing something badly. The fourth pattern has nothing to do with ambition. Sometimes people don't avoid action because they lack motivation. They avoid it because their nervous system is already overloaded. From the outside, they appear lazy. Inside, they're carrying unfinished conversations, financial stress, family expectations, constant self-comparisons, old disappointments, an invisible emotional weight. All of this consumes enormous psychological energy. Big dreams require emotional capacity, but survival mode leaves very little energy for growth. This is why someone can desperately want success while simultaneously feeling unable to begin. The issue isn't ambition, it's exhaustion. Understanding this difference matters because you don't solve exhaustion by shaming yourself. You solve it by recovering enough energy to move again. The fifth pattern is overthinking disguised as productivity. Some people become addicted to thinking. They analyze every possibility, every outcome, every risk, every strategy. Their mind convinces them that more thinking will eventually create certainty. But certainty rarely comes first. Action creates clarity. Not the other way around. Every successful person has taken steps while still uncertain. Every expert once acted without knowing exactly what would happen. Thinking has value, but after a certain point, it quietly becomes another way of postponing discomfort. The life you imagine will never meet you inside your thoughts. It only meets you on the other side of action. The sixth pattern is the fear of closing doors. Every decision silently eliminates hundreds of other possibilities. When you choose one career, you say no to dozens of others. When you commit to one dream, countless alternate futures disappear. For some people, this feels terrifying because they see potential everywhere. Psychologists sometimes call this maximizing. The constant search for the best option. The problem is that no decision ever feels complete. What if there's something better? What if I regret this? What if I waste years on the wrong path? So instead of choosing, they keep exploring. They read another book, watch another video, research another opportunity. Months later, they know far more. But they're no closer to beginning. Ironically, refusing to choose is still a choice. It simply allows time to make the decision for you. The seventh pattern is something few people talk about. Success itself can become frightening. Most people assume everyone wants success, but psychology paints a more complicated picture. Success changes your identity. It changes your relationships. It changes what people expect from you. If you finally become successful, you may outgrow old friendships. Family members may treat you differently. People may expect more from you forever. For someone whose identity has always been built around staying safe, success can feel strangely threatening, without realizing it. They begin sabotaging progress just before something important happens. They miss deadlines, abandon projects, change directions, or convince themselves to start over. Not because they don't want success, but because success demands becoming someone unfamiliar. Sometimes our biggest fear isn't failure. It's becoming a version of ourselves we've never met before. The eighth pattern lives inside the conversations people have with themselves every day. Before they even begin, they hear a voice saying, "You'll probably quit. You're too late. Someone else is already better. Who do you think you are?" Most people assume these thoughts are reality, but often they're echoes of old criticism from parents, teachers, childhood comparisons, embarrassing failures, or moments when trying led to pain. Over time, those voices become internalized. Eventually, you stop needing anyone else to discourage you because your own mind does it automatically. Psychology refers to this as internalized criticism. The tragedy isn't that the critic exists. It's that people mistake it for truth. The voice may sound familiar, but that doesn't mean it's accurate. The ninth and final pattern is perhaps the saddest of all. Sometimes dreaming isn't preparation, it's emotional refuge. Reality feels stressful while the future feels comforting. Inside the dream, everything works. People admire you. Life finally makes sense. You're respected, confident, and free. The imagined future becomes a safe place to visit whenever the present feels overwhelming. Eventually, the fantasy begins serving a different purpose. It's no longer motivating action. It's protecting you from today's discomfort. The dream itself isn't the problem. But if imagination becomes the place where you experience achievement, reality slowly becomes the place you avoid. That's when hope quietly turns into hiding, if you recognize yourself in these patterns. Don't immediately conclude that something is wrong with you. Your dreams aren't evidence of laziness. In many cases, they're evidence that a part of you still believes life can become something better. Your mind may simply be using outdated strategies that once protected you from disappointment, rejection, uncertainty, or emotional pain. The good news is that psychological patterns are learned, and what is learned can also be changed. Your dreams don't need to become smaller. They simply need one small action to become real. Psychology reminds us that lasting change rarely begins with massive motivation. It begins with tiny actions repeated long enough for the brain to believe, "This is who I am now." Confidence doesn't come before action. Action creates confidence. The person you hope to become isn't waiting for perfect timing. They're waiting for today's smallest decision. So before you leave, ask yourself one honest question. What's one action you've been postponing for months that could take less than 10 minutes to begin today? Write it in the comments. Not because strangers need to know, but because sometimes the first real step isn't changing your life. It's finally admitting what you've been avoiding. And that single moment of honesty is often where every meaningful transformation begins.